Claire hadn't heard a knock on her cabin door in nearly 2 years, until that night, when a mud-covered man with haunted eyes appeared on her porch carrying a sleeping child in his arms and whispered, "Please, we have nowhere else to go." She should have turned him away. She should have asked questions, but something in his voice, low, cracked, desperate, unlocked a part of her she'd buried deep. And when she let them in, she had no idea she was opening the door not just to fugitives, but to a secret powerful enough to bring down men who thought they ruled the world. The wind howled between the pine trees as James Callahan gripped the steering. Wheel tighter, his knuckles white under the weight of fear. Mud splattered against the windshield as his black SUV tore through a winding, unmarked forest road. In the rearview mirror, he caught a glimpse of his 5-year-old son, Leo, fast asleep with his small hands clutched around a battered stuffed dinosaur. James exhaled shakily. At least Leo was too young to understand what they were running from. It had all happened so fast. 1 week ago, he was hosting meetings in a Manhattan high-rise, signing million-dollar contracts for his cybersecurity firm. But then he found the files, hidden payment trails, messages and encrypted logs, names that didn't belong in the system. A criminal syndicate was laundering money through his company's back end, and they were powerful, government-connected, ruthless. He turned the evidence over to the authorities. Then everything collapsed. Someone inside the system leaked his name. 3 days later, an unmarked black car followed him home. Then his security guard went missing. Then a bullet shattered his office window while Leo was sitting on his lap. Now here he was, off-grid, no phone signal, no plan except to disappear. He had been driving for hours through a national forest in northern Maine, hoping to find anywhere safe, anywhere no one would think to look. The GPS had gone dead 2 hours ago. The dashboard clock blinked with static. James was running on fumes, emotionally and literally. He checked the fuel gauge, nearly empty. He cursed under his breath. Just when he thought he might have to pull over and sleep in the car, he saw it. A dim yellow light glowing through the trees, flickering like a lantern. As he rounded the next bend, a small wooden cabin came into view, smoke curling gently from the chimney. He pulled into the muddy driveway, tires crunching over wet gravel. Carefully, he opened the door, mindful not to wake Leo, and carried his son up the porch steps. He knocked twice, then a third time, his heart pounding in his throat. The door opened slowly. A young woman, blonde hair pulled into a loose braid, stood in the frame holding a lantern. Her expression shifted from surprise to wariness as she took in James's disheveled appearance and the sleeping boy in his arms. "Hi," she said softly. "Are you lost?" James hesitated only a second. We just need shelter. One night. I'll pay you anything." She blinked, visibly processing. "I'm not worried about money," she said finally, "but I don't usually get visitors, especially not like this." "Please," he said again, voice cracking. "He's just a kid." The woman glanced down at Leo and then back up. "All right, come in, but quietly." She stepped aside and let them in. The cabin was small but clean. The air smelled like cedar and herbs. A golden retriever lifted its head from a rug in front of the fire but didn't bark. Leo stirred slightly and nestled closer to his father's shoulder. The woman guided James to the couch and helped him lay Leo down. She handed him a wool blanket. "You look like you haven't slept in a week." "I haven't." She didn't ask questions. Not yet. Instead, she went into the kitchen and returned with a cup of tea. "Chamomile," she said. "Good for shock." James sipped it, not tasting anything but grateful for the warmth. His eyes locked with hers. There was something in her gaze. Quiet, steady, unafraid. "I'm Claire," she said finally. "James." They didn't speak much more that night. Claire showed him where he could sleep, left a pillow and a blanket, and returned to her own room. James sat in the armchair, one hand resting on Leo's back as he slept. Outside, the forest was silent except for the wind and the distant hoot of an owl. James stared into the fire, realizing for the first time in days that, for now, they were safe. And somewhere deep in his gut, he also knew he hadn't just found a place to hide. He had found something or someone he wasn't ready to lose. Morning came gently, with soft rays of light slipping through the curtains and the smell of burning wood and something warm cooking in the kitchen. James blinked awake in the armchair, stiff and aching. His first thought was of Leo. The boy was curled safely under the wool blanket on the couch, still asleep, one arm wrapped around his stuffed dinosaur. James rubbed his face and stood, careful not to wake him. He followed the faint sounds coming from the kitchen, clinking dishes, the low hum of a kettle boiling. Claire stood at the stove, barefoot, in a faded sweater and flannel pants, her blonde hair now pulled into a messy bun. She didn't flinch when she noticed him enter. "Good morning," she said quietly, turning down the heat. "I hope the fire stayed lit for you last night." "It did, thanks," James replied. His voice was hoarse. "And thank you for letting us stay." Claire nodded without looking at him. "There's oatmeal on the stove, and I made tea again. It's not much, but it's warm." James stepped forward, hesitant. "That's more than I deserve. Most people wouldn't have opened the door." Claire finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired but calm. "Most people haven't been through what I've been through either." She didn't elaborate and he didn't ask. Instead, he poured himself some tea and took a seat at the small kitchen table. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It felt like something understood. "I'll help with chores," James offered after a moment. Claire raised an eyebrow. "You ever collect eggs from chickens?" "No, but I can learn fast." She gave a tiny smile. "All right, after breakfast." Leo woke up shortly after, yawning and stretching before padding into the kitchen, eyes wide with curiosity. Claire bent down to his level. "Hi again, Leo. Do you like honey on your oatmeal?" He nodded, a bit shy, but already more alert than the day before. She fixed him a bowl with honey and cinnamon and placed it in front of him at the table. As Leo ate, James watched Claire move through the kitchen with quiet efficiency. She never asked about why they were there, who they were running from, or how dangerous it might be. She simply fed them, gave them warmth, and asked for nothing in return. After breakfast, Claire led them outside. The morning air was crisp and fresh, sunlight dappling through the tall pines. A chicken coop stood near a small garden patch surrounded by a short wooden fence. Leo lit up instantly and ran ahead to peer at the hens. Claire handed James a basket. "It's not glamorous work, but it gets you moving." James laughed softly. "I used to give presentations to investors in glass towers. Now I'm collecting eggs with a 5-year-old and a woman who lives in the woods." Claire gave him a sidelong glance. "Sounds like a better audience." As they worked, James began to relax for the first time in days. The rhythm of the morning, gathering eggs, pulling a few weeds, carrying wood to the porch, calmed something inside him. Leo was happier here than he had been in weeks. And Claire, still quiet, still cautious, was slowly beginning to open up. Later that afternoon, while Leo napped by the fire, Claire sat with James on the back porch, both of them wrapped in worn flannel blankets. "Can I ask one thing?" she said softly. James turned to her, guarded but willing. "Are you running from something or someone?" He took a long breath. "Someone. Dangerous people. I can't tell you more. It puts you at risk." Claire was silent for a moment. Then, "You don't have to tell me everything, but if you're here with a child and you're afraid, then you're not the problem. Whoever's chasing you is." James looked down at his hands. "I wasn't expecting kindness out here. I thought I'd find an empty shack at best. But instead, I found you." Claire's voice was even. "I came here to disappear. You came here to survive. Maybe we're not that different." James met her eyes. For a moment, everything was still. And in the quiet between them, something fragile and important began to take root. By the end of the third day, the rhythm of life at the cabin began to feel almost natural. Mornings started with quiet breakfasts and soft footsteps, followed by outdoor chores that James found unexpectedly grounding. Leo had adapted faster than his father, his wide-eyed curiosity blossoming into joy. He chased chickens, helped carry small baskets of herbs, and followed Birch, Claire's aging golden retriever, as though he were a guardian spirit. Claire remained calm and observant. She noticed how James flinched at sudden sounds, how he sometimes stared too long at the treetops, as if expecting something to descend. She also noticed that Leo never let his toy dinosaur out of reach, even when sleeping. Trauma had left fingerprints on both of them, visible to anyone who'd seen its marks before. That afternoon, Claire and Leo worked together in the garden, while James fixed a creaking window shutter. He had asked Claire if he could improve some of the house's worn-down fixtures as a thank you. She agreed, but always watched from a quiet distance, as though trying to understand the layers behind his every action. It wasn't until that evening that Claire first saw a crack in James's composed exterior. Leo had gone to bed early, tired from a full day of sunshine and play. Claire brewed tea while James sat on the floor near the hearth, staring into the flames. Birch rested beside him, head on his paws. Claire handed James a mug and sat across from him on the worn rug. He didn't say thank you this time. I had a team, he said after a long silence. People I trusted. One of them turned, sold my name, my location. Claire listened, still and present. They tried to kill me, but it was Leo they almost hit. A sniper round through the window, shattered glass all over him. He didn't cry. He just looked at me like I could fix it, like I had the power to stop the world from coming apart. Claire felt the sting of tears in her own throat but didn't speak. I'm not used to running, he continued. I'm used to power, to solving problems with money, technology, logic. But none of that matters now. I don't even know what day it is. Claire finally spoke. You know your son's safe. That matters. James nodded slowly. He's everything. He's all I have left. For a long time they sat in silence, the fire popping softly. Claire reached behind her and pulled a folded quilt from the chair, laying it across his shoulders. I lost someone once too, she said quietly. A fiancé. Car accident. One moment I was planning a life with him. The next, I was alone in a hospital corridor, trying to remember how to breathe. James looked up at her. Something shifted between them. Unspoken pain, recognized and understood. I thought disappearing was the only way to survive, Claire said. Turns out maybe surviving means letting someone else in. James looked at the fire again, but this time there was something softer in his expression. Later that night, as she checked the locks and blew out candles, Claire glanced once more at the man who now slept soundly on her living room floor, a protective hand still resting beside his son's blanket. She had let them in. The fourth day began with an unnatural silence. No birdsong, no rustling wind. Even the trees seemed to stand still, listening. Claire noticed it the moment she stepped outside to gather herbs. Something felt off. She looked up. Sky clear, air still. But the hairs on her arms rose. Birch, usually relaxed and lazy, stood stiff at the edge of the porch, nose in the air, a low growl rumbling from his throat. James was already awake. He had barely slept the night before, too consumed by the memory of the drone. He hadn't told Claire yet, but during his last stop before entering the forest, he had seen a man in a suit sitting inside a parked sedan. Not FBI, not press, syndicate. Now, something in the stillness confirmed what his instinct screamed. They were being watched. He found Claire inside the cabin, already preparing breakfast. She saw the look on his face and didn't ask, just waited. I need to tell you everything, he said. Claire set the spoon down and sat across from him, the fire crackling in the stove between them. James began, voice steady but low. My name is James Callahan. I'm the CEO of a cybersecurity company that contracts with government agencies, banks, and hospitals. A few months ago, I uncovered a backdoor in our software, one I didn't design. Someone was using it to launder money and collect private data. Claire listened, her eyes locked on his. I tracked it back to a shell company tied to a criminal syndicate. Russian money, offshore accounts, people with influence. I turned the evidence over to a federal contact. Within 48 hours, I was being followed. My assistant disappeared. A former engineer was found dead in what they called a suicide. Then, they came for me and almost killed Leo. He rubbed his face, voice trembling now. I have proof, encrypted files, hidden in a USB key, inside Leo's toy dinosaur. I couldn't leave it behind. It's the only thing keeping us alive. Claire sat back slowly, processing everything. Does anyone know you're here? She asked. No, I didn't tell anyone. I used cash, changed the car twice, wiped everything. Claire stood and walked to the fireplace. She pulled down a wooden panel hidden behind a stack of firewood. Inside was a small metal box, dusty but clean. She opened it to reveal batteries, two-way radios, an emergency flare, and a revolver. You're not the first to run here, she said simply. This cabin belonged to my uncle. He used to help women escape domestic violence. He taught me how to keep people safe. James stared at her, stunned. She turned to him. We're not going anywhere. But if someone's out there, I need to know what kind of danger we're in. How far they'll go. They'll kill me, James said, and take Leo as leverage, or worse. Claire's face steeled. Then we make sure they don't get close. That night, Claire showed James her emergency escape route, an underground root cellar she had dug years ago and reinforced with stone. She stocked it with dry food, water, and blankets while James set up motion sensor cameras from a weatherproof tech case he'd hidden in the car. He taught Claire how to use them, how to reset the frequency if it jammed. Leo, sensing the shift in energy, stayed close to Claire. He asked fewer questions than usual, but held onto his dinosaur tightly, as if he knew. As darkness fell, Claire lit only one lantern, covering the cabin's windows with thick quilts. James took the first watch with Birch at his side. Claire stayed up with Leo, stroking his hair as he fell asleep. Later, when she joined James at the front window, she said quietly, "If they come, we don't run. We trap them." James turned to her, eyes weary but grateful. "Why are you helping us?" She didn't hesitate. "Because someone once saved me when no one else would. This time, I get to be the one who stands in the way." Outside in the darkness, something moved in the trees. But inside the cabin, a fortress was forming, one built not from fear but from resolve. The next morning broke with gray skies and a tension so thick it seemed to press against the cabin walls. James had barely slept, spending most of the night glued to the motion sensor monitor. At 3:17 a.m., he caught a flicker, a shadow moving between trees. Too tall to be an animal, too still to be wind. Claire came into the living room fully dressed, boots laced, a hunting knife strapped to her thigh beneath a long sweater. She carried a thermal travel mug and handed it to James. "Chamomile and peppermint," she said. "You look like hell." James offered a dry smile. "That's because I feel like it." She checked the windows, then the door locks, while Leo still slept. Outside, the air was too quiet. No birds, no wind, just like the day before. Claire retrieved a walkie-talkie from the metal box she'd shown him earlier and handed him one. "I'll take the north perimeter. Stay close to the house and keep the other radio on you. Don't let Leo out of your sight." James nodded, taking the device. "Don't go too far." "I won't," she said. "I just want to see if there are fresh tracks near the eastern ridge. If someone was close last night, they probably didn't cover their trail." While Claire headed out, James made breakfast, eggs and toast. Leo sat at the table quietly, clinging to his stuffed dinosaur. "Are the bad people coming?" Leo asked, not looking up. James crouched beside him. "Not if we stay smart and strong, like superheroes." Leo nodded slowly, and James hated how quickly his son had learned to live with fear. 30 minutes later, Claire returned, face pale, eyes sharp. Tire tracks, fresh, less than 12 hours old, and boot prints. Large, heavy step. They were close. James stiffened. "They know we're here." Claire glanced at Leo and lowered her voice. "We have to assume they'll come back, soon." That evening, they began setting traps. Claire led the effort, digging shallow pits and covering them with leaves. James helped create spike deterrents with sharpened sticks and fishing wire strung low between trees. At each step, she was precise, efficient, and calm. She moved like someone who'd prepared for war. After Leo went to bed, Claire and James reviewed the camera feeds. On the northern edge, just beyond one of the blind spots, a figure moved again. Slowly, methodically, in and out of frame. Tall, male, carrying something. Not FBI. James felt ice in his veins. "That's not a scout. That's surveillance. They're watching patterns." Claire looked at him. "They're planning an approach." That night, James finally opened the secret compartment inside Leo's stuffed dinosaur. Claire watched as he pulled out a small black USB drive, barely larger than a fingernail. "This contains the entire data dump," he whispered. "Account numbers, names, offshore links, enough to bury the entire syndicate." Claire leaned back. "Then we don't just protect it, we weaponize it." James looked confused. "I know a guy," Claire said. "A journalist I treated once when I was a nurse. Investigative. Real old school. He owes me his life. If we can get this to him, he can release it. Make it too public to silence." James nodded slowly. "How soon?" "We'll need to find a secure relay point. Maybe the ranger tower on the other side of the ridge. It's old, but it had radio access years ago." He looked at her in awe. "You've really thought all this through?" Claire gave a small, sad smile. "I didn't think I'd need to use it, but I prepared anyway." They sat in silence for a long while, firelight flickering across their faces. Birch lay between them, head resting on his paws, eyes still watching the windows. Do you think we'll make it? James asked quietly. Claire met his gaze. I think we have one shot, and I think we're going to take it. Outside, a branch snapped. James stood reaching for the rifle he had placed behind the bookshelf. Claire extinguished the lantern, plunging the room into shadow. She pressed her back to the wall, knife ready. Tomorrow, she whispered. We send the message. And with that, the real fight began. Morning arrived like a held breath, pale and hushed, the kind of day where the forest itself seemed to sense danger. The plan was simple, but the execution carried risk none of them could afford to miscalculate. James stood over the map Claire had drawn on a sheet of parchment paper, marking out the fastest route to the abandoned ranger tower 5 miles northeast, through rugged terrain and dense pine. The tower was high enough to catch a signal, maybe even strong enough to ping a secure server or a burner laptop through Claire's solar battery pack. Claire prepared the supplies with precision. A compact radio, flash drives, satellite beacon. She wrapped Leo's dinosaur, now emptied of its secret, in a warm scarf and tucked it back in his backpack. Leo, still unaware of the true weight of their morning errand, sat near Birch, munching on an apple, content but watchful. Claire turned to James. You ready? James nodded, but his eyes flickered toward Leo. I hate leaving him behind. Claire placed a hand gently on his arm. I'll stay with him. You go. If anything happens here, I'll keep him safe. James hesitated a long moment, then crouched in front of Leo. I have to run an errand with Birch, he said gently. Claire's going to stay with you. She's the boss while I'm gone, okay? Leo blinked. Are the bad guys coming? James paused. Maybe, but we're smarter. Leo nodded solemnly. Tell the forest to protect you. James's throat tightened, but he smiled. I will. He and Claire embraced briefly. Nothing romantic, just raw trust and gravity. Then he took the backpack and the satellite gear and disappeared into the trees with Birch trotting silently behind. Hours passed. Claire kept Leo busy with puzzles and simple games while always watching the perimeter, constantly checking the walkie-talkie. Time slowed. She made them soup from stored root vegetables, but neither of them ate much. Leo sensed it too, something looming just outside the calm. Then static crackled on the walkie-talkie. Claire grabbed it instantly. James, come in. His voice came through low and steady. I'm at the tower. There's a signal. Uploading now. 30%. Claire's breath hitched in relief. How's Birch? Still better at trail running than I'll ever be. He's watching the ridge. Be fast, Claire said. I have a bad feeling. Minutes crawled by. Then, upload complete, James whispered. Sending copies to the backup addresses. One to the FBI safe server. One to the reporter. If this doesn't bury them, nothing will. But before Claire could respond, she heard it. A vehicle engine. Close. Too close. She grabbed Leo and tucked him into the hidden cellar beneath the floorboards. Stay here, no matter what. Don't make a sound. He nodded bravely and clutched his dinosaur. Claire grabbed the revolver from the emergency box and took position by the window. A black SUV pulled into the clearing, exactly like the one she'd seen in the tracks. 2 men stepped out, both in dark coats, both with earpieces. One knocked. The other circled the house. Claire didn't answer. A second knock, harder. We're looking for a missing child and his father, the first man called out. May we speak with you, ma'am? She remained silent, gun raised. After a moment, the door burst open. The first man stepped in, scanning the room. Ma'am, we don't want to hurt you, Claire fired. The shot slammed into the doorframe beside his head, warning not intent. I have nothing for you, she said coldly. Get out, you have 10 seconds. The second man appeared at the rear window, just as the perimeter alarm James had set earlier began beeping from the back wall. The LED flashed. They were compromised. Then a howl, fierce and sharp, from outside. Birch. The second man screamed. Claire moved fast. She kicked over the table, using it as a barricade, and crawled to the radio. James, they're here. I'm on my way, he replied. Hold them. 10 minutes. But Claire didn't have 10. The first man lunged toward her. She shot again, this time grazing his shoulder. He fell back with a snarl of pain, blood soaking through his jacket. But the second was now inside. Claire fought him hand to hand, using every ounce of her strength and the training her uncle once drilled into her. He tried to pin her, but she drove the butt of the revolver into his jaw, breaking loose. Just as he lifted his weapon again, glass shattered. James crashed through the side window, covered in mud and sweat, Birch bounding in behind him. He tackled the man, slamming him against the wall. Claire moved quickly, reloading. "Down!" she shouted. James ducked. Claire fired a shot into the ceiling, forcing the injured first man to drop his weapon and surrender. They bound both with zip ties, secured them in the woodshed, and called in the encrypted beacon James had activated from the tower. Within an hour, a black unmarked helicopter descended in the clearing. Real agents this time. The syndicate's men were arrested. James handed over the USB drive's authentication key to the lead agent. It was over. For the first time, James let himself breathe. And Claire, shaking, let him hold her. Not in fear, not in panic, but in survival. They had won this round, and everything was about to change. The following days passed in a surreal haze, as if time had briefly collapsed around them and was now unsure how to begin again. The arrest at the cabin sent a ripple through federal channels. By the next morning, James and Claire were officially debriefed by FBI agents in a secure location, and Leo was given a full physical and psychological assessment to ensure he had not been harmed. The agents confirmed that James's data upload from the Ranger Tower had detonated a legal bomb across multiple jurisdictions. Half a dozen high-ranking syndicate members had been arrested within hours of the broadcast. The rest were now running scared, hunted instead of hunting. James was given full immunity and placed under high-level protection. But when the FBI offered him a secure penthouse in D.C., a new corporate role, and a re-entry plan into the tech world, he declined without hesitation. He didn't want to go back, not to boardrooms or surveillance cameras or cold luxury. Instead, he asked for one thing: the legal rights to purchase the land where the cabin stood. 3 weeks later, James stood on the same front porch where he'd first begged a stranger for shelter. Only now the property was legally his. The cabin had been repaired, the garden replanted, and a discreet solar power system installed that allowed them to live with both comfort and independence. Claire remained by his side. The government offered her security as well, and even a commendation for her part in the takedown, but she refused the attention. She wasn't a hero in her own eyes, just a woman who had been quiet for too long and finally found a reason to raise her voice. One morning, as mist drifted between the trees and birds chirped in tentative joy, James made pancakes while Claire braided Leo's hair at the table. He had insisted on growing it out, and Claire had taught him how to keep it neat. "I think we should build a treehouse," Leo said between bites. James grinned. "With a trap door?" Claire smiled. "And a lookout window for Birch." The dog wagged his tail from the rug, already dreaming of the next adventure. After breakfast, they walked the property line together. James held Claire's hand while Leo ran ahead. The forest no longer felt like a place to hide. It felt like home, wild and sacred, a witness to fear and healing. Claire stopped beneath a tall pine, one of the oldest on the land. She looked at James, her fingers gently woven with his. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd passed by this place?" James looked down at her and shook his head. "No, because I didn't." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. When Claire opened it, she found a silver ring set with a pale green stone, soft, earthy, unlike anything flashy. "It's not about what I ran from," James said. "It's about what I found, and what I hope to build." Claire's breath caught, eyes misting. "Marry me," he said simply. She nodded once, then wrapped her arms around him. "Yes, but I don't need anything more than this." Later that evening, they sat together on the porch, watching Leo paint stones with wild colors, laughing freely. The danger had passed, the scars were real, and the future still uncertain. But they had chosen each other. Not because life was easy now, but because it was honest, and finally theirs. Spring melted into summer, and with it came warmth, not only in the air, but in their lives. The trees that once whispered danger now sang with birdsong. The tension that had once clenched inside James's chest slowly unwound, replaced by something gentler, something he hadn't dared to hope for. Peace. For the first time in months, perhaps years, he didn't wake expecting to run. Claire's garden flourished. Leo had his treehouse, complete with a rope ladder, a hidden compartment, and even a small lantern for reading after sunset. He called it the Lookout, and insisted Birch sleep beneath it at night, guarding his fortress of branches and dreams. James threw himself into rebuilding, not just the cabin, but his sense of self. He and Claire installed a water filtration system, crafted bookshelves by hand, and began sketching out designs for a guest house. But more than that, they built a rhythm: slow mornings with coffee on the porch, afternoons with laughter echoing through the trees, and nights of quiet storytelling beside the fire. Word of James's data leak had faded from the headlines. The FBI handled the rest discreetly. The men arrested at the cabin never spoke a word, either too afraid or too well paid to turn on their masters. But without access to global systems and financial networks, the syndicate began to wither. It wasn't a total collapse, but it was enough. James had dealt them a blow they would never recover from. And then, on a day as bright and soft as silk, the wedding happened. It was nothing like the corporate spectacles James had once attended. No tuxedos or choreographed speeches. Just a clearing between trees, a circle of pine cones and flowers gathered by Leo, and a simple linen dress Claire had sewn herself. James wore rolled sleeves, barefoot, holding a bouquet of wild lavender. A local ranger James had befriended officiated. Leo stood between them, holding the rings on a slice of tree bark. Claire's voice trembled only slightly when she said, "I never thought I'd find a man who understood silence. But then you came, carrying storms, yes, but also light. You brought me back to the world." James swallowed hard. "I came here to hide, but I found something worth standing for. You, him, this life." They kissed beneath the trees, and Leo threw petals into the air like confetti. Birch barked once, as if giving his blessing. Afterward, they danced barefoot under strings of handmade lights. They ate fresh bread, roasted vegetables, and peach pie. At sunset, Claire took Leo's hand and danced with him while James watched, heart full. That night, after Leo had fallen asleep with a flashlight in his treehouse, James and Claire lay together on the porch, wrapped in a single quilt, watching fireflies rise. "You're still a wanted man, you know," Claire teased softly. "Wanted by a woman with a garden and a stubborn streak." James laughed, then turned to her with serious eyes. "I think I was lost long before the syndicate. You helped me find my way back." She reached up to brush his hair. "You were never lost. You just hadn't arrived yet." They lay in silence, the kind that says everything. And as the moon climbed above the pines, the forest, once a place of escape, stood watch over the family it had quietly adopted. The man who once ran from the world had rebuilt his own, not with power, not with wealth, but with love. And it was enough, more than enough. As the author, I see the ending of the story not just as a resolution, but as a quiet revolution. It's a story about survival, yes, but even more, it's about healing. James began as a powerful man stripped of all control. Claire, once a healer, had retreated from the world. Both had been broken in different ways, but fate, by chance or something greater, brought them together in the forest, where the silence made space for truth and the wildness gave room to grow. The final image of the family under the stars, with a child safe and laughing, and no more footsteps in the dark. It's a victory not of revenge or violence, but of love, protection, and choosing peace after chaos. In a world so often focused on the big dramatic wins, I wanted to end this story with something softer, but stronger. Because sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stay, rebuild, love again. And that's exactly what they did.